Good morning. I'm Councillor Bridget Wayman, Chairman of Wiltshire Council. I would like to welcome members and the public to this extraordinary meeting on the 11th of March 2025. I have received numerous apologies, which I will go through, from councillors Liz Alstrom, David Bowler, Richard Budden, Claire Cape, Sam Charleston, Caroline Corbyn, Jane Davis, Monica Devendran, Sarah Gibson, Gavin Grant, Howard Greenman, Mel Jacob, Simon Jacobs, Johnny Kidney, Carol King, Catherine McDermid, Robert McNaughton, Dr. Brian Matthew, Charles McGrath, Mark McClelland, Paul Otway, Sam Pearce-Kearney, Antonio Piazza, Rich Rogers, Tom Rounds, Joe Trigg, Tim Trimble and Robert Ewell. If members are aware of any other apologies, can you please raise your hand? No, there are none. Thank you. Moving on to declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of disclosable interests or dispensations to make to the meeting? No, none? Okay, Chairman's announcements. So with the local elections taking place on the 1st of May, this will be the final meeting of full council for many members. I would therefore like to take the opportunity to thank everyone for their work as councillors in the last 4 years, and in particular those members who will not be re-standing. I am aware of some members who we believe will be standing down, but I will note for now those members who specifically confirmed to officers they would not be, including Steve Bucknell, Mark Connolly, who was first elected in 1993, Sarah Gibson, Peter Hutton, Johnny Kidney, Brian Matthew, Simon Jacobs, Ian McLennan, Tim Trimble, David Vigar, Derek Walters and Suzanne Wickham. Would any retiring members, councillors, like to say a few words at this time, or else note that they are not standing? Right, can you press your buttons? First on my list is Councillor Suzanne Wickham. Suzanne.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. Nearly 6 years, and I wouldn't be here but for the fact that Jerry isn't. I think everybody knows that. However, one of the things that I've learnt enormously whilst doing this role is the benefit of the village organisations that I've looked after. First of all, the parish councils, very often unthanked and unloved maybe, but enormously helpful in the roles between the council and the local the villages that they look after. They're not paid as we've paid an allowance, and they work really, really hard for their villages. Also, the enormous amount of voluntary organisations. They enhance the lives of the villagers enormously, and I'm sure this is relevant to many, many divisions and many towns and towns and villages. But I think it's worthy of note that the way in which they enhance village life is really, really huge. So I very much want to thank them and put on notice how much they've helped me as a councillor in that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Councillor Laura Mayes, I think you just wanted to say something, or would you like to wait at the end? Okay. Councillor Mark Connolly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you said, I was first elected in '93, so 8 terms as a Wiltshire County Councillor and Wiltshire Councillor, quite a long time. And a few months ago, Christopher Newbury and I started talking about the fact that if we were in the House of Commons, I would be the father of the House, and that if he's re-elected in May, that he would become the father of the House. So good luck to him on that. But there is one other councillor that's actually served the same amount of time as me, but decided to take 4 years off for some reason, Ricky Rogers. And so I wish him all the best and hope he gets elected so he becomes the longest serving councillor. Seen a lot of changes over that period. In '93, we had Swindon at that point, and it was a Liberal Democrat minor administration at that time, which I was part of. Then '97, of course, Swindon went unitary. I crossed the floor in 2000, so 25 years as a Conservative. We changed from the committee system to the cabinet, and then, of course, the big one, we became a unitary council in 2009. And I'd like to thank all the officers that have supported me, both as a local councillor and as chair of various committees. And they've been outstanding, and I think we're lucky to have the calibre of officers that we do here in Wiltshire. So much so that obviously we've had a couple of our chief officers nicked by Surrey, but there you go. But also I'd like to thank all the councillors past and present that have supported me and been working with me on various projects. And I wish every councillor that is standing again all the best. And for those that aren't, whatever they do, I hope they enjoy themselves in their retirement from political life. And finally, just like to say that I hope whichever administration is in place in May, that they keep Wiltshire on the straight and narrow as we have over the last 15, 16 years, keeping steady budgets and providing good services for the people of Wiltshire. But all the best for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Connolly. Councillor Steve Bucknell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say a few words. I mean, I'm stepping down after just one term. Having said that, though, I was a North Wilts District Councillor for a period, and I have been a Town Councillor in Royal Wootton Bassett now for nearly 20 years. I just wanted to say what I've enjoyed about this role and then finish with what I've not enjoyed quite so much. So what I've enjoyed about this role is obviously working with some very bright, committed and hard-working people. That's council officers, of course, town and parish councillors and organisations, which have already been referred to by others, and colleagues, Wiltshire councillors of all political persuasions. There's some very bright and committed people here. We don't do this for anything other than a sense of public duty. And so thank you to all of you that I've worked with. I've enjoyed helping residents when they've come to me with problems, and I've also enjoyed keeping residents informed of things that I think are important to them and to the places they live. I've enjoyed immensely chairing the Police and Crime Panel and helping to move that forward in a very difficult period of time for Wiltshire Police. The colleagues, members of the committee there have been very supportive of me during my time as chair. Some have been a little bit challenging to manage, haven't you, Ross? But it's been a very pleasant period of time for me chairing that. And I would like to thank the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable for their impact and input into Wiltshire Police. What I've not enjoyed so much, I've not enjoyed being unable to achieve the changes and the progress I would like to, and that's really because of the size of this council. The relative lack of input and control that we backbenchers have is not pleasant, and it's a huge contrast to what we can achieve at parish and town level. I don't enjoy having to fight to get Royal Wootton Bassett the attention I think it deserves. Again, because this council, I think, is so large. And I don't enjoy the party politics that can happen in this chamber. It is a waste of time. It does not result in better decisions, and it contrasts again very sharply with what happens in committees such as the Police and Crime Panel and the Planning Committee. I've enjoyed sitting on the Planning Committee and had the input really of members from both the Lib Dem Party and the Conservative Party looking to make very good, honest decisions without politics playing any part in it. And it compares very starkly with what we're about to achieve in Royal Wootton Bassett Town Council, having now taken the decision to become a non-political council. I don't think that is necessarily achievable in a council of this size. I think large councils like this have a problem. I think they are less democratic than town and parish councils as a result. but that's not the fault of anyone sitting in this room. It is the fault of central government. I'd like to finish just by saying thank you to all of you. It's been an interesting ride, and I wish you all the very best of luck in May. Some of you more luck than others, of course.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Ian McLennan.
Thank you, Chairman. I was elected on, I was looking at it the other day, elected on May the 4th, 1995, and Kieran tells me that we get switched off on May the 4th, 2025. So the 4th has been with me for 30 years exactly, and then I get switched off. So I don't know what happens after that. But I've enjoyed my 30 years most of the time. Not always, and I expect it happens to every single person here, that somewhere about mid-term you think, oh, this is a real slog. And then something happens positively and you think, yeah, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I was able to do that. I'm glad I was able to help somebody somewhere or get a project through. And that's what keeps us going. So it's kept me going for 30 years. It's already been mentioned, but apart from this chamber where we all do our theatricals and you know, say a few things, anti this and pro that against each other, otherwise, outside of this chamber, we are a very good working operation where we just literally look at what another councillor is saying, and if we can support it, what they're trying to do, we do. And that's happened to me in both directions. I've tried to help others, others have tried to help me. And along the way, projects get done. Some we can do very quickly, and some take forever. And in my own case, I had a boardwalk that I needed to get along one of the roads where people were literally risking their life or had to go through a flood to get to work. And met the landowner and the area board person at the time, officer, and the highways officer, and they all said, yeah, no problem. 5 years later, that got done. Lots of ifs, ands, and buts in between times. The longest one, I found an old leaflet, my original leaflet, that said, we have a big school traffic problem in Laverstock 30 years ago. 30 years later, with the help of Nick Holder, helping it through, we got that in, and it's made a miraculous difference. Councillor Britton along the way, and Rich Rogers too, have helped to try and keep that going. Officers particularly have helped it, but it's taken a long, long time to get anything done. But 30 years later, I can sleep in peace on May the 4th. So I would just like to say, I'm not going to go on, thank you very much to every officer that's helped, to every councillor that's helped me, for your camaraderie and friendship along the way, and the chats along the way, and the electoral review committee I loved, and all those that chaired that, how you can remember all those things when you present to all the people, God only knows, because I'm thinking, where was this again? Oh yeah, I remember now. And whoever's been chairing it, Richard was one, you know, Stuart's been one, and you know, yeah, how you remember it all, clever. And I was placed once because somebody couldn't come until about 10 minutes later, and fortunately Kieran was there, and he helped me through the process until it might have been Richard coming to take over. So good luck to you all in the elections. Some will win, some will not. Commiserations if you don't, and congratulations if you do. And good luck to Wiltshire Council. And I hate local plans and spatial planners. Not really, but... Yeah.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Peter Hutton.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of thank yous going to be said today, but I'll try and keep mine brief. I didn't think for 1 minute when I entered politics that I would be standing in front of you to say that I've been a unitary member since 2009. I'm very grateful to all the officers. They are a wonderful asset to this council, and I've had a pleasure of working with many officers, both senior and junior. But also, I would say it's one of opportunity. Councillor Bucknell alluded to the police panel. I sat on the police panel for 8 years. I sat on the Dorset and Wilts Fire Authority. I wear my tie with pride. I've done a lot of committee work, and that is where the work needs to be done. And I think mention quite rightly has been, and I use the last full council meeting as example, this can be a theatre. It's been said many times from lots of colleagues, past and present. But I think the one thing I would say to every councillor, whether they're here now or in past May, always keep the respect of each of one another. When you come out of this full council meetings every time, you work tirelessly in your area boards, your committees, your plannings. You have to work together to deliver what the people of Wiltshire deserve. So thank you, Chairman, for giving me the opportunity. It's been a wonderful 16 years and I wouldn't have missed it for anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Well said. Councillor David Weigel.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to be standing in May, having just been on the council for one term, actually. So really just a newbie standing down. But I want to make time for other stuff, including resuming a musical career that I rashly abandoned in my 20s. So there's lots of things to do, and I'm going to go and do them. It's been a fascinating experience to be part of the democratic process here, and I'd like to say thank you to members on all sides of the House who've provided advice, especially when solicited. And thank you also to the officers, as everybody said, who've been very helpful, very patient. One thing I noticed last night when sending an email at unusual hours, which I tend to keep, once again I noticed there are officers working, because you can see it on the email system, going beyond the call of duty all the time. So thanks to all the officers, a great job you do, and also for the support that you give to all councillors, particularly thinking of Kieran, who put up with some very oddball questions when I was first elected. So thanks very much for that. One thing I wanted to mention, like Suzanne, for example, mentioned people in parish councils and in village organisations. One thing I've discovered, particularly, I guess, for being on a town council, is the immense strength of our voluntary organisations in Wiltshire, and the unusual things that happen when you become a councillor. I never expected in 2021 that last Friday I would have been walking through Trowbridge Town Centre with my beard painted with purple glitter in support of an organisation called Fear Free, which does fantastic work, as many of you will know, for victims of domestic abuse in Wiltshire, and was running a Free the Night walk in order to assert the right of women and girls to be able to walk the streets of night without any sense of insecurity or fear. They are a fantastic organisation. I never probably would have encountered them if I'd not been a councillor. Tomorrow night, I'll be helping somebody to do a light survey at Trowbridge Town Football Club to ascertain the light levels on hedges in advance of floodlights going in. I never thought I'd be on the committee of a football club and involved in their planning applications when I got elected in 2021. Some interesting things happen, and some of those things for me will carry on after being on this council. So I would encourage anybody who think you're standing for public office to realise it's not just about being in council chambers, making speeches, being in meetings. It's actually being out there meeting people, and there are some fantastic people you meet, and that's a really rewarding part of the job. And so finally, I want to say thank you to the voters of Trowbridge Grove, or the residents of Trowbridge Grove. Lovely people, lovely place. I look forward to seeing quite a lot of them in the next 6 weeks, and I'm confident that they'll be well represented on this council over the next 4 years. It's a great place to represent. So thanks very much, goodbye, and to everybody who deserves it, good luck.
Thank you. Councillor Derek Walters.
Well, I wasn't expecting to say anything today, in the fact that I didn't think we were going to be here today. So I haven't got anything prepared. What I would say is that from my experience, being elected at a time when we had the pandemic and so on, it's quite difficult to get to meet people and to build those sort of relationships which are helpful. But gradually, as time's gone on, I've met many of you, and I have to say I echo some of the expressions here that people, broadly speaking, are working hard, committees and so on, in order to benefit the community and the communities that they actually represent. I do echo the comments about things being overly party political. I don't think that's necessary. I think we should, stick to facts. Not throw out, either, insults or anything like that. I just do not think we have a place for that in this house. I would like to make some specific thanks to Caroline Thomas for her support for me in working on improving safety outside of school in Rudloe. I'd like to thank Tamara Ray for her help in organising we hope organising a lease on a community centre. And I would like to, just broadly speaking, thank all of you that have supported me in the things that I've done. And again, to the council officers, likewise. Thank you. It's been brief, but pleasant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Derek. Councillor Laura Mayes, I think, just wanted to say a few words.
Oh, thank you. I'm not leaving, I hope. But I did want to just say very quickly a really big thank you to Councillor Suzanne Wickham and Councillor Peter Hutton. And I suddenly thought, gosh, I hope they're not leaving because of me. But you have been the exemplary portfolio holders for me in children's services. Peter very much concentrating on children's safeguarding, corporate parenting and young carers, and Suzanne for special educational needs. And it can be a hard job being a cabinet member. I think people don't really understand the stress and strain that it can put on you, and particularly with children's services. But having the support of Suzanne and Peter has been absolutely invaluable. And what's very special about them is they have really got involved in the service. They're the ones who go and meet the families and go to the play centres and the special schools and all the other places where young people are. And sometimes I envy them that because I don't spend as much time as I would like to. But really their contribution has been so fantastic and really was part of how we got our outstanding and good outcomes in our recent inspections. So I will miss you hugely, but thank you very much for everything you did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I can't see anybody else wanting to speak, so thank you, everybody. Oh, a quick sales pitch for anybody who might want to buy a lovely silk busted tie to promote the county, which is promoted by the Lieutenancy. They are for sale in the Lieutenancy office at £30 each. And I believe there is a kind of brooch for ladies, women, girls, whatever. So that's the end of my sales pitch. I will move on. Public participation. As this is an extraordinary meeting, questions and statements can only be made in relation to the business specified in the summons. Members of the public who have registered to make a statement will be called upon to speak for up to 3 minutes each. And I would remind speakers that any statement must relate to the agenda item, and that once their statement is concluded, they may not speak further on the item. I will remind speakers to remain on topic. With questions, we've received 9 for this meeting, which will be considered under the next item, and people may ask a supplementary question to any response they receive, which must relate to that response. Okay, moving on to agenda item 5, which is the local transport plan. I call upon the Cabinet Member for Transport and Assets, Councillor Tamara Ray, to present this item and move a recommendation. The report is included in the summons and can be found at pages 6 to 17. Councillor Ray.
Following the recent consultation, I'm pleased to bring the 4th local transport plan to full council. It goes without saying that a safe, reliable and efficient transport network is an important component of everyday life. It is especially essential in a rural county where connectivity by road and rail provides access to a wide range of essential services and facilities. It is an important enabler for modern society with impacts on the economy, people's health, social exclusion, climate change, and the countryside. Transport makes a vital contribution to Wiltshire Council's business plan priorities, and the transport network in Wiltshire must be capable of supporting sustainable economic growth in accordance with the Wiltshire Local Plan. As such, we will continue to work with government and industry partners to secure funding for improvements to strategic roads, that is the A36, the A350 corridor and the A303, and rail, particularly at Westbury Station, where additional track capacity is needed, additional capacity on the Melksham line, and new stations for Devizes and Corsham. The 8-week consultation was widely promoted across the county using a range of communication methods and generated over 57,000 impressions on social media, 383 responses and 1,077 individual contributions. There was a consensus that the draft documents were lengthy and that respondents would prefer a simple and easy to read format. Hence, a single executive summary has now been produced. Respondents were especially keen to know more on how the policies would be implemented, and a draft delivery plan is at Appendix C of your pack today. This plan sets out a balanced vision and set of policies for the period 2025 to 2038. It is reflective of the needs of our large rural county, where many of us are reliant on our cars for everyday lives. It is about carrot and definitely not stick. We will not penalise residents who choose to use their cars, but where we can, and working with partners, we will continue to make sensible investments and improvements in active travel infrastructure and public transport. We most certainly will not bring forward mad schemes such as charging emergency vehicles to enter our towns and city. Thank you to the officers from across the council and cabinet colleagues who have worked together to develop this plan, which is grounded in reality. Thank you also to the members of the Climate Emergency Task Group and Environment Select Committee. Your input and overview and scrutiny are welcomed, and I look forward to continuing to work with you as we take forward the delivery plans. Thank you to the residents of Wiltshire and other stakeholders who contributed to the consultation. This is a plan to make Wiltshire an even better place to live, work and do business. So in summary, this plan sets out the Council's transport ambition for the decade ahead, based on our guiding themes of prevention and early intervention, improving social mobility and tackling inequalities, understanding our communities and working together. The strategic objectives and policies in this plan will ensure that Wiltshire is well placed to maximise the opportunities and address the challenges facing our beautiful and vibrant county in the longer term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. I assume that you're moving the recommendation. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Clure, thank you. I am just looking at my sheet, and I believe we have one public participation statement from Mr. Andrew Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm current chair of Wiltshire Climate Alliance, which is a large local voluntary organisation. Chair, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, 6 years and 2 weeks ago, a clear majority of you resolved to acknowledge that there's a climate emergency, to work with others to limit global warming to less than 1.5 degrees through all relevant strategies and plans, and to seek to make the County of Wiltshire carbon neutral by 2030. You opted for the word seek instead of pledge, because it was important that a motion would be achievable. The deal, or so we thought, was that you would use your best efforts to get as close as you can by 2030 and go carbon neutral as soon as possible after that. I want to acknowledge how much you have done. You've set up a climate team, you've commissioned reports, and you've started out on delivery plans. You've come a long way, so you know what it's going to take, a lot better than you did. But today marks the day when you very publicly betray that 2019 resolution, abandon that aspiration, and turn your backs on that very emergency, which is already causing serious loss and damage here in Wiltshire. Because you're adopting a local transport plan that lazily stops at bridging no more than 1/3 of the transport emissions gap. Because this local transport plan makes choices you don't have to make to delay or veto measures that would take us further and faster down the road to decarbonising transport. When you say these aren't possible, you're gaslighting us. When you say you can't race ahead of public opinion, I wonder why you aren't showing more leadership. Because you've balked at feasible measures to influence travel behaviours using the power of the purse. Simple measures that would make people feel safer walking to and fro. Urgent measures to clean up the foul air in the streets of our towns. Ambitious measures to cut the non-essential car journeys that hold us all up in the peak hours. Many of the most helpful proposals in your LTP3, covering 2011 to 26, are still waiting to be done. We found out that under 10% of your town cycling improvements have been built. And I don't think you ever even got round to writing and publishing your LTP3 walking strategy. No wonder my co-workers and I are sceptical and pessimistic about your LTP4. Are members of the public impressed by this plan? I'm not sure. Should they be? I think not. Behind all the fine words and graphics and vague commitments, it's business as usual.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. We have a number of questions. Can I just go through, who's here? Is Catherine Reid here? Does she want to ask a supplementary? No? Margaret Wilmot? Is it just you, Mr. Nicholson? Would you like to ask any supplementaries to your questions?
Looks as if attendance is below par all round. Thank you for the detailed written answers to my questions and those of some of my friends. And I'm going to just ask you two questions. I'll try and keep them simple and straightforward because this is asking for oral answers. So you've established the source of the 1/3 figure for emissions that local authorities might influence, and the fact that that applies across the board and not specifically to transport. Have you got a Department for Transport figure in mind, or to hand or in mind, for the fraction of transport emissions that local authorities are thought to be able to influence? For example, is it over or under 50%?
Councillor Ray.
I'm going to come back to you on that one, Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. And on another part of a question that I received an answer to, I asked the report, the LTP4, I think it's in the carbon paper, says this about car trips made through the county boundary, and it says the main opportunity for influence on these trips is by collaborating with neighbouring authorities, etc. Well, the answer, because I mentioned freight in the question, possibly, your answer was only about freight. So I'm going to just follow up on car trips. Are you, or how are you currently collaborating with neighbouring authorities, let's say Baines and Swindon, on cross-boundary measures to reduce car trips across the county boundaries?
Thank you. We collaborate through the subnational transport body, the Western Gateway, and there are a range of strategies, papers, and you'll be aware of the strategic investment priorities that Western Gateway has recently consulted on. We work on those, and also working with the rail industry in order to secure and bring forward investment in our rail network, particularly on the western boundary, where we can look to move more journeys from car onto rail, including, for example, the critical Westbury interchange, which needs investment in order to bring more capacity into the whole of the western network.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Nicholson. Is that your final comment? Okay, good. I will now go to group leaders before we open the debate. Councillor Richard Cluer.
Thank you, Chair. The creation of this document has taken a huge amount of work, time and effort. I want to thank everyone who's been involved. For those who haven't been through every last page, it's significant. I think it's important we understand as a council what it is and what it isn't. It's a document government require us to produce. It's called the Local Transport Plan. Really, it should be the Local Transport Strategy, but government do love giving us names. My least favourite of those being the Green-Blue Infrastructure Strategy, which makes virtually no sense until you explain to someone the detail of what it actually does. But we have to call it a plan. It's not. Plans are the elements that follow behind this document. They're the delivery elements that come after it. It's a strategy, it's a skeleton on which we can then demonstrate our aspirations, the areas we need to see addressed, the work we need to see done, and then work with government to make sure that we have the ability to secure funding where relevant for some of those bigger schemes, that it ties in properly with our local plan, which is one of the reasons that we are bringing it forward now, because we've got the local plan with the inspector at the moment. So it perhaps doesn't achieve it isn't perhaps what it would appear at first value in terms of being a definitive plan. And that is, I agree, frustrating for people. Residents read it and want to hear about what we're going to fix in their area. That's the element that follows on from it. We've heard some comments about betrayal of carbon targets and the fact that we should be using our powers to force people to do things. I do want to be really clear. I don't think it's our role to tell people whether a journey is essential or not, or to tell people how they should make that journey. What we need to do is make sure that we have the infrastructure in place so people can make journeys by whatever means they want or need to get around the county. And for most of us, we know that that's car. But also, we need to have a structure in place that enables us to then work with national policy to, in the case of cars, decarbonise, switch to electric vehicles, have the infrastructure in place for doing that. So this should not, in my view, ever be a document about telling people how to behave or forcing them to change behaviour through punitive measures. It should be about providing the infrastructure, providing the network, providing the choice, and ensuring the direction of travel sits with government policy, and in this case sits with the need to reduce carbon emissions and bring on new technologies, whatever they end up being. And I think that is a really important distinction. There is no betrayal here. What's here is a realistic, evidenced, thoughtful approach to try and achieve those goals, but to do so in a way that isn't going to declare war on the motorists, that's going to cause people to be taking to the streets, ripping up LTN blocks and the sort of behaviour we've seen across other councils. It's something that the people of Wiltshire, I hope, can understand. More importantly, I hope we'll find isn't punitive but helpful. I'm delighted that we've got it to the stage. I'm delighted that we're bringing it forward now. It's a critical document, but it's only going to work if we then put the plans together that go underpin it, that go alongside it, and get the investment from government back to the North-South infrastructure study and the need for freight to move more quickly on roads that don't go through our town centres, for example. So it's going to take a lot more work to turn it into something deliverable. And we talked about LTP3, and my critique of LTP3 was it wasn't deliverable. It had all sorts of aspirations with no rational way of delivering the results in them. That is not what we've got here. What we've got here is a document that's very carefully crafted to have the aspirations, but phrased in a way where we are actually able to make some progress on delivering them. I hope we do.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Thorne.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And can I offer my thanks also to the members who won't be with us because they're intentionally standing down for the election. I was rather concerned to hear that Councillor McLennan is being switched off on the 4th of May. That sounds really quite distressing, but I wish him well, switched off or not. And as I said in the budget debate, and I believe this very passionately, there are fantastic councillors right across this chamber who are here because they care passionately for their communities and want to achieve great things. And so I thank you, those of you standing down that we've heard from today, for everything that you've done and everything you've given to Wiltshire and your communities. Can I also say I'm delighted to see Councillor Newbury here, following his absence last time. So it's good to see you, it would appear, back to health. That's very good. And can I also thank my good friend Andrew at the back and his colleagues from WCA who hold our feet collectively to the fire and challenge us time and time again. And it's an important role for civic citizenship that people do that and spend that time and do so. I also want to thank officers for the extraordinary amount of time they've spent on the 900-page document. I assume there are more copies sort of sitting on that table. If we're not very careful, it will tip up at some point, I suspect. But nonetheless, thank you to officers for what has been as Rich would say, a magnum opus in terms of publications. And can I end my thanks by actually thanking our local democracy reporter, Jessica Moriarty, who leaves us today, or leaves us shortly, I should say, and just underline the importance of the BBC and its commitment to ensuring that our discussions, our debates are heard and hopefully to some extent understood by the residents of Wiltshire. Turning to the report, and thank you, Tamara, for your brief presentation. I just want to pick up on a couple of things that Richard said. I always make a note of what Richard says, and he'll correct me if I've got his words wrong. This is not a definitive plan. Well, at 900 pages, that surprises me. It will take a lot of work to make it practical, I think Richard said. Well, again, at 900 pages, you would hope that there would be a degree of practice appearing in the document. There is a bit of a tradition here, and I've spoken at length about the council's business plan being terribly aspirational, and if I'm allowed to use the phrase terribly motherhood and apple pie, but without an awful lot of guts in it. We had a similar debate when it came to the cultural strategy, which was a wonderful document, but I suspect with very little chance that much of it will ever be delivered. And my concern about this document is exactly the same. And I think it would be very interesting to have a more detailed discussion, given the amount of time and taxpayers' money that was spent on LTP3 and indeed LTP2 and presumably LTP1, to understand what those documents did to contribute to our transport planning objectives, ambitions, and aspirations. Just a couple of other things before I cut my discussion short, which will be a pleasure to some of you. Somebody asked me this morning, actually, in our group meeting, what's my view of active travel? What's my personal view of active travel? And I have to say, and I'll be very honest, it's walking out of the house with my car keys, undoing the door to my car, getting in the car and driving off. So I don't think there's any party political capital to be made out of trying to talk up car drivers, because we're all car drivers to a greater or lesser extent due to the very nature of the county that we live in. But I do think it's interesting in terms of the consultation responses that we've had, that the outcome of the consultation appears to be, from our members of the public, a much, much clearer view in terms of the degree of public transport that residents want, as opposed, perhaps I could say, to some of the rhetoric that we're hearing from the administration. I think it is disappointing the number of consultation responses we've had, given the impacts this document should have on our community, positive impacts. And I have to say that I look forward to...
Can you wind up, please, Councillor Thorne?
I'm just about to wind up, Madam Chairman, so thank you. It was my last sentence, actually, so thank you very much for that. Genuinely so. I look forward to seeing the delivery plan or plans that go with this document. I would like to understand how much this has cost us. I understand we have to do it, but I'd like to know how much it's cost us. I will be, my last sentence, literally, and this could be my last sentence speaking at a Wiltshire Council meeting, of course, Chairman, which some of my colleagues across the way might be delighted to hear, but hopefully not. So I just want to end by saying that I personally will support the proposals. We have to have a policy in place, and I would hope that post-May there'll be an opportunity to make some significant changes to this document. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne. Very long sentences. Councillor Ernie Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. As ever, I'll be somewhat briefer than Councillor Thorne. Going off the subject slightly, I was pleased to hear that Royal Wootton Bassett has gone for an independent basis as the Town Council. It's a shame that Trowbridge couldn't, so I believe they've tried it. And as to the comments about how this chamber should be formed, well...
Can you keep to the... We are now debating or talking about the local transport plan. Can you keep to the subject, please?
Sorry,
With
Chair,
short sentences.
I was just taking my lead from Councillor Thorne, but I understand good. No, as far as the item goes, I'm pleased to see the report. It'd be interesting to hear the debate. It was surprising that how few people responded when you bear in mind how important this is. But as it was said, what can we do other than publicise it? It's up to the public to respond to it. But as I say, I'll be happy to listen to the debate and see where we go, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Clark. Councillor Ricky Rogers, who I'm sure will keep it succinct and to the subject.
No, I've got a lot to say, Chairman. A lot of years under the belt. Can I say personally, I'd like to listen to what Ian says. Probably one of the reasons why I'm going to throw the hat in the ring again. I hope to continue to listen to what Ian says, maybe from a different position, who knows. Anyway, the local transport plan, I think I want to add my support to what's on the screen there, 1 and 2. Absolutely important that we have a local transport plan. I think through my sort of adoption, I've seen many of these plans, your views change. If I go back 35 years ago, my view as someone trying to run a business and getting stuck in traffic all over Wiltshire, that was my focus. Let's get things moving. Let's end these, gridlocks. Let's end the traffic jam. Let's end the hours of me sitting on the Alderbury bypass trying to get into Salisbury. Then sort of through the late 90s, I became a keen cyclist, and my sort of priority became, let's have more cycle lanes, let's have more walking routes. And now I find myself in a position of, I'm looking at public transport. Now that I've got my bus pass, the priority is not the car. I don't really like taking the car out. Thank you to Ian for bringing me today. But my priority now is on, how does public transport work for me? What's the bus timetable? What's the rail network? So, I think it's important, we've got to keep evolving this plan and make it work for all sections of the people that we represent. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. I will now move to the debate. So any member wishing to speak, please can you press the button on your microphone console to be added to the queue of speakers. First in line is Councillor David Weigel.
Thank you, Chair. So I've seen this plan a few times because I'm on the Climate Emergency Task Group, chaired by Councillor Wright. So we've been through it a couple of times. And I have to say that what it feels like is a fantastic dissertation on the transport network of Wiltshire and some very worthy aspirations, but trying to find actual measures to achieve those aspirations is like looking for a needle in a haystack. So, I also am a fan of public transport, so I was looking for the public transport policies, and I found a table on page 500 where it says the policies are set out, but what you get is a description Good public and shared transport links are vital for the success and prosperity of Wiltshire's communities. Yes, we all agree with that. And then you get an aspiration. We'll prioritise improving the frequency, speed, reliability and flexibility of our bus services, but there's no actual measures there. So I then look at a thing called a delivery plan, page 1006. Again, we find the same rhetoric about public transport being essential in enabling people to get around. And then again, you get an aspiration. Through the shift, improve and support policies, our aim is to ensure public transport services meet needs. So then I look for the improve and support policies. I find them back in the executive summary, and it's simply the policy is provide better access to public transport. Well, how are we going to do this? Finally, I do find something specific, and the Cabinet member referred to it on page 354 about the opportunity for rail service improvements, and particularly reopening the stations at Devizes and Corsham. That was through something called the Restoring Your Railway Fund. It's still in this report, even though Rachel Reeves cancelled it last summer. So once you do get to something specific, you find it actually doesn't exist. It's a bit like fishing by hand. Now, I understand that the government's process and the government framework for doing these things may have forced us into doing it this way. But what I read in other local transport plans from other councils is that the LTP should outline the current baseline. This does it brilliantly. Set out challenging, achievable objectives. Again, 10 out of 10. But set out the programme for achieving these objectives and also outline bids for funding from the DFT. I don't see those second two there. What I would like to have seen is what can this council do through actual substantial funds, if it can get hold of substantial funds? What can it do with small sums through, for example, information and communication? What government budgets are available? And what more can we do with partners such as bus and rail operators? So my question, I guess, for the Cabinet member in summing up would be, have I missed something? Are there some more substantial plans here for public transport that I've overlooked? And if it's not that, if it is that the government framework forces us to do this, 1,000 pages of description and aspiration, divorced from the actual delivery plans, then can't we challenge that? I won't suggest an amendment, as that takes forever, and I want to leave here on reasonably good terms with everybody. But can I just suggest that by whatever means we can, we make representations to the government if it really is the case that the government process is making it the way it is. If it's not the government process, then I think we need to re-examine the way we do this ourselves. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Weigel. Councillor Dominic Munns.
Thank you, Chair. Good government is about balancing aspirations with the constraints that residents face. It means making responsible, balanced decisions without persecuting our residents. That's exactly what you get with LTP4. Sadly, the Lib Dems in Somerset have failed to grasp this. Their lack of sensible decision-making has resulted in a £66 million budget deficit and forced them to ask government for a 22% council tax increase before being told that 7.5% was all that residents could cope with. If you want a specific example of narrow-mindedness in Somerset, look no further than Bath. The Liberal Democrat obsession...
Excuse me, Councillor Munns.
Yes.
Can you stick to the debate, the subject in hand, which is LTP4? You are straying off the subject.
We're talking about LTP4 here and how we'll move around the counties.
Can you do
want to
that
set the
now?
context. If you want a specific example of narrow-mindedness, look no further than Bath. The Liberal Democrat obsession with
Councillor Munns, I'm sorry.
Chair,
I
what's
want
the issue
you
here?
to stick with the subject here. This is the local transport plan for Wiltshire.
What is... It's very difficult to debate what we should do in Wiltshire without looking at the context across the border.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Let's be very clear. Any obsession with prioritising carbon emissions above everything else will harm a city. Well, I hope not, but your colleagues in Bath have done that. In Wiltshire, we've taken a far more pragmatic approach. We are not going to implement clean air zones and then charge ambulance and police vehicles to drive through them. That is narrow-minded insanity. Yes, government requires us to decarbonise, and transport plays a significant role in that. But we need to ask ourselves why transport plays such a significant role. is because Wiltshire is largely rural. We are a number of communities connected by roads, and most residents have no viable alternative but to get in their cars to visit people. LTP4 finds the right balance. It moves us towards carbon neutrality without punishing people who need to drive a car. We've seen what happens when ideology replaces common sense. Some people who won't be named in a city across the border that won't be named have shown us that. Wiltshire residents do not want to suffer the same fate. LTP4 brings the balance that our residents need. Sensible road safety initiatives, improved public transport options, lower speed limits near our schools, and safe cycle and walk routes away from roads, not squeezed onto them. It's all in here. Now, I want to turn my attention to Ms Reid, who is the leader of Wiltshire's Green Party and whose questions are in the agenda pack and were posed to Councillor Ray. She's really demonstrated her appetite for dragging us out of our cars. Now, residents in my division in the Lavingtons have told me that they cannot risk being banned from driving down their own street to get to work just because they happen to live close to a school. Likewise, they can't afford to pay congestion or clean air zones to visit Salisbury, Trowbridge or Devizes. Road safety improvements can be achieved without all of this, and I've worked tirelessly in the Lavingtons to improve road safety, including Black Dog Crossroads, but also championing speed reductions in every single village. And LTP4 will support my continued work in that way. I'll be supporting LTP4 today, and I offer some friendly advice to Lib Dem members here. Don't follow your colleagues in Somerset. Work with us to support rural Wiltshire residents. Leave the Greens to narrow-mindedly punish Wiltshire residents who have no choice but to reach for their car keys.
Councillor Steve Bucknell.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be glad to hear that I'm not going to be making any party political speeches for election purposes. All of my comments are specific to the LTP4, which I will be voting in favour of, but we are invited, by the looks of it, to suggest some minor amendments which can then be made. First point, page 175, reference to the Royal Wootton Bassett to Swindon cycleway. We've already heard from our leader that we need to ensure we have the infrastructure in place to give people the choices to travel by car or other means. This cycleway was first mooted, I think, at least 15 years ago, and it has been council policy for at least the last 12 years. And in spite of repeated badgering from myself, from Royal Wootton Bassett Town Council and from Royal Wootton Bassett Environmental Group, and I thank them for their input along the way, the last 4 years of my term, we've seen no progress whatsoever. And in this LTP4, it is mentioned that there is a desire to have this, this cycleway put in place, but we still do not have a timed project. There's no project plan out there that says when certain elements of this are going to be done. And I'm hugely disappointed that I've been unable to influence this council to move forward with the cycle route between Royal Wootton Bassett and Swindon. It would be very well used. It would improve the safety for cyclists who have to cross, go along the A3102 and cross junction 16 at the moment. It's a nightmare journey, and I take my hat off to anyone who's brave enough to attempt it. Please, can we make sure that the cycleway is put in place? And I would suggest also that if any of the unwanted residential developments happen in Royal Wootton Bassett, we make the developers contribute significantly towards the cost of that cycleway, because it will help to ease pressure on junction 16. My second point, page 183, there is a passing reference to a railway station at Royal Wootton Bassett, and it says that it could well be a park and ride station, which would help ease pressure from Swindon Station. Now, this needs to be far more important to Wiltshire Council than the passing reference that is given it. It would bring significant benefits, and would those would accrue in terms of both economic development and the decrease in high carbon travel. It would also help to ease capacity issues at junction 16. I would like to see much more effort put in by this council to a park and ride station at Royal Wootton Bassett. And the final point I would make is On page 165 and again on page 989, Devizes and Marlborough are both referred to as having attractive town centres. The same paragraph then goes on to mention Calne, Horsham, Malmesbury, Royalton, Bassett, Bradford-on-Avon, Melksham, Warminster, Westbury, Amesbury, Tidworth, Luddershaw, and yet they're not blessed with the same such adjectives. Does this council feel that the town centres of those towns aren't attractive? My point may seem a little bit flippant, but if you then consider the way that those two towns have been treated and the number of times that they are mentioned within LTP4, and I must say that one of the huge benefits of having a PDF document for LTPF4, a 1,000-page document like this, is you can do a search, which I have done, to see which towns are mentioned how many times. Now, Royalwood and Bassett, of course, I looked that one up first. It's mentioned 14 times in the 1,000 pages. Calne, just down the road, 16 times. Okay, I think I don't mind that, I suppose. We're similar-sized towns. Malmesbury mentioned 6 times, poor old Malmesbury. Cricklade and Purton only 4 times each. Amesbury 12 times, Warminster 9 times, and Horsham 16 times. But then you look at Marlborough and Devizes. Marlborough 23 times, obviously much more important than Royalwood and Bassett, even though it's smaller in terms of population. Devizes 26 times, a bit bigger. I could go on, and I shan't, but Bradford-on-Avon is 2/3 the size of our town. It's mentioned 37 times. 37 times compared to only 14 for Royalton and Bassett. Even Swindon, not even in Wiltshire, is mentioned 73 times. You compare also Salisbury, Chippenham and Trowbridge, very similar in size in terms of the size of the populations. Trowbridge mentioned 60 times, Chippenham 82 times, Salisbury 152 times. Now, from my point of view, this is just an example of how difficult it is for a small town like Royalwood and Bassett in the far north of the county to get the attention it needs from such a large authority as this, which I've got to say it, I'm afraid, the attention seems to go to the south of the county all of the time. It's a feeling that we've got up in Royalwood and Bassett. We are neglected. You haven't delivered our cycleway. You don't really have any interest in delivering our railway station. And I'm afraid, therefore, the people of Royalwood and Bassett do feel terribly, terribly neglected by this council. Do something about it. Show you mean something.
Can you wind up, please?
Just about to.
Well,
show that you really do care about us by delivering the cycleway and delivering the railway station. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bucknell. Councillor Paul Sample.
Chairman, thank you very much. I will try to keep my comments directly on the matter in front of us, which is the Local Transport Plan 4. And I'd like to congratulate the members and the officers for putting together this document. And I will be happy to speak in support of the policy that's being adopted here. What I would like to say is that there is no question that a council the size of Wiltshire, with such a large rural population across many hundreds of hamlets and villages, is going to have a policy which discriminates against the motorist. There is no question. All of us, in some way, shape or form, use cars on a regular basis. However, there is a generation of people coming in for whom conventional expectations around having a job for life and a house that they can afford and a nice car is starting to become something of an unachievable dream. And my daughter is one of those examples. She has recently learned to drive, but she cannot afford a car. And in the meantime, she is borrowing the car that I own. There are lots and lots of children growing up, and our duty is to those children in future generations of using cars as part of a balanced transport policy, but also using public transport where necessary, cycling, use of the railway, wheelchair users who've not been mentioned, buses, etc., walking. It is part of a mixed transportation policy which we're adopting here. Now, it hasn't got everything, and that's a shame. But actually, there's a lot in it which is worthy of support, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to recommend it to you. However, there are some elements of detail that, as Steve has said, are lacking. There's no mention, as he said, of the cycleway between Swindon and Royal Wootton Bassett. That's a shame. I feel his pain because, as a local member, I feel as helpless as he does. And hopefully that situation will change for both of us in a few weeks' time. The incoming council will have more people who are sharing cars. It will have more people who are bus users. It will have more people who prefer to use cycles or walk or even run to work, as we've seen in the consultation. But I just want to put in a word for a small group of people, which is growing, and it's those people who are living in our residential areas where there is no off-street parking. Residential streets where there is a real problem with getting parking at night. In my area, for instance, residents' parking scheme is very, very oversubscribed. We've got so many cars, not enough space really for all of them to park, particularly when we've got big events in the centre of the city or even church meetings on a Sunday morning. I want to talk specifically about that generation of people who are growing up, seeing their friends and other members of the community using EVs, electrical vehicles, which can be recharged off-road. There are lots and lots of housing developments have gone in up across Wiltshire where provision has been made for electrical vehicle charging. But there are a lot of streets across the whole of Wiltshire where it is very, very difficult for people to recharge electric vehicles, and this is putting them off making that move. There are people who are disadvantaged because we're not only providing insufficient on-road parking provision, but we are failing to give good advice and support for those people who want to buy EVs but have to park in residential streets. And if we do one thing as a local authority over the next 4 years, I hope very much that it will be to double the number of residents who can charge their vehicles at the side of the road near where they live with the support of Wiltshire Council and the help and advice of officers. And that is the change that I would wish to see just for my residents in St Edmunds Ward. I hope very much that you'll support LTP4. It has my support and I recommend it to you.
Thank you, Councillor Sample. Running a little bit over your time, but I've given you a little leeway. Councillor Derek Walters.
Madam Chairman, I intend to be as brief as possible and state the point. This document, it feels like I'm on a ship with a captain. He says we're going to New York, but as we come out of Southampton, we turn left and head in an easterly direction towards continental Europe. This document makes 280 references to active travel, okay? Now, if we have a look at some of our policies and we look at our speed limit policy, we look at the carriageway repair report, and we will see that basically I think there's one reference to active travel. So my point is that there is no point in any of this unless we're going to see it run right through, the strands are going to run right through all the silos of Wiltshire Council. And what I'd also point out is that there are the things that really impact on pedestrians and cyclists are exactly those things: speeding traffic, potholes in roads, and drainage. If you've ever ridden a bike in the rain on a road that's got potholes, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So we need to make sure that these threads run right the way through our operation. And I would point out to some of the members here that brought forward a motion back in October suggesting that the motorist in Wiltshire was being abused or might be abused, and therefore we should not do things to subject them to any restrictions. I'd like to point out that's a very negative approach. What we should be doing is we should be basically finding ourselves policies, joined up policies, that give a genuine alternative to people in this county. Mention has been made of low traffic neighbourhoods, mention has been made of clean air zones. The majority of the people in this county either live in a rural area or a market town. We're not suggesting, nobody's suggesting low traffic neighbourhoods, and those are all clean air zones, but there are places in Wiltshire that really would benefit from that, where people are subject to air quality issues. And, you know, I'd defy anybody to say that the motorist is king. This is 20th century thinking. We need to be moving forward into the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. Councillor Helen Belcher.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to start by questioning whether it was a plan, and thank you, Richard, for your clarification that the government is telling you you have to call a strategy a plan, because one of the things I wanted to start with is on page 201, where it seemed to indicate that itself it wasn't a plan because it was talking about having to refresh plans. And Ian talked a little bit about the motherhood and apple pie, which makes it very difficult to kind of have any meaningful opposition to this. The document seems, in my kind of reading of it, to rely an awful lot in certain places on other people's actions. And I absolutely take on board that the council should not be dictating what other people can do. But when a document relies a lot on other people taking action, then we need to have a much clearer understanding of what incentives the council is intending to put in there. Another comment is there's not a lot about wheelers, and I don't mean our former chair. I mean people who have mobility issues, people who use mobility scooters or chairs to get around. As somebody whose knees are starting to sort of fail because of the amount of active travel I did in my youth, less so now, you kind of become a bit more appreciative of the need for easier travel around. And there's hardly anything in this document for those people who need a lot more assistance in getting around and might actually like to be more physical than just waiting for a bus to get from A to B. But I do kind of agree with Andrew when he said there was a lot of fine graphics and vague words. It seems to me there's a lot of print here, over 1,000 pages, to express a strategy, and I appreciate it's trying to be a bit more detailed. Yesterday evening, Ruth, my colleague, and I sat in Corsham Town Council as we approved our Corsham Town Council transport plan. That had 44 pages in it, including 1 page lost for the header and 1 page lost for a very nice graphic on the footer. So 42 pages where it actually detailed specific actions on particular issues and particular junctions in some cases, and it graded them with high impact and high importance. Now, that was the kind of thing I was expecting to see in the plan. So I appreciate it's a strategy, not a plan, but 1,000 pages plus to outline a strategy where in Corsham, which is, what, 1/16 of the county, we managed to condense down to a plan with 42 pages, kind of makes me think, what's going on here? Another issue which I have raised with officers in the past in terms of road safety is the lack of cat's eyes, the lack of reflective buttons in the middle of the road, which now happens. And I've noticed it driving around North Wiltshire, so not just my patch, but way out to Cricklade and so on, that the number of stretches of road without cat's eyes is increasing enormously, and that creates massive problems in terms of safety when you can't see where a road is going. Members might be aware that there is a campaign which is being launched about the brightness of oncoming headlights. Well, that problem is exaggerated if you can't actually see a visible line at night during the road. So I would like to see something about improving road safety by cat size. And lastly, in terms of Corsham, thank Councillor Bucknell for noting that Corsham is mentioned in the same number of times as Royal Wootton Bassett. Some of that, a little bit of that was about the railway station. The railway station, we were told, has a very good business case behind it in Corsham, one of the best that the consultants had ever seen. And as Councillor Vigar mentioned, it was part of the Restoring Your Railways Fund, which Rachel Reeves scrapped. I worked with Baroness Randerson to put a question in the House of Lords in the autumn about the Restoring Your Railway Fund and what would happen to the schemes, and she received quite a vague written answer back. So I would urge the council to build on that written answer, and I'd like to pay tribute to Jenny Randerson, who died very sadly and very suddenly at the beginning of the year, and that's a big loss on all things transport around the country. As I say, it's difficult to vote against it because there's not really any kind of problematic stuff in it. It's what it doesn't include that's the issue.
Thank you, Councillor Belcher. As someone with poor eyesight, I thoroughly agree with you about cat's eyes and not being able to see in those bright lights. I gather in Australia they're experimenting with fluorescent lines. Maybe it'll come here. Sorry, I digress. Councillor Martin Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It's absolutely vital that we have a transport plan, but I have to say that the plan we have here before us lacks a bold vision. Critically, it also lacks key performance indicators and funding. Given the fact we've had an emergency full council meeting called just to consider it, I do wonder whether this plan is really ready to be approved. And I do question why the rush now, having sat on this issue for some time. I'm aware that various interested stakeholders, including our friends in the Wiltshire Climate Alliance, are very unhappy about the lack of time they had to consider the 1,000+ pages of this plan and associated appendices. The rushed nature may explain that there's been no reference to certain bits of detail that various members have been picking up just in this debate. The example I had was the park and ride scheme in Salisbury, and no mention of the steps needed to make this work more effectively. I'm also curious as to why so few responses were received as part of the public consultation. There are only 383 for the whole county. This appears to be a very small number, given that the single bike lane proposal in Chippenham received over 1,000 responses. Whilst I'm on the issue of consultation, I'm surprised that we haven't seen any of the qualitative data on the input from the public. Where are their comments? I'm sympathetic with the member of the public who asked the question about how many people had actually asked for sort of new roads and the new road building plan. I'll have to say Councillor Ray's response was a bit evasive in my view. Reference was made to people highlighting the importance of the strategic network. Does this somehow justify new road building? It could just mean the roads, could just mean keeping the roads maintained, not necessarily building new ones. And I have to say, you can't even look after the existing roads, never mind look after new ones as well. As the leader of the council said, the LTP4 is less of a plan and more of a plan for a plan. It's a list of aspirations, many of them rather vague and woolly. And it's not just me saying this, the public thinks so too. In the consultation summary report, many questions were asked about how effective various policies would be. In most of the responses, people said they didn't know or were neutral about it. They're basically saying there just isn't enough substance in the plan to form an opinion. So if we are to believe the words from the Cabinet, this is a plan that supports motorists. But what does that actually mean? Is the implication that you support the status quo and you're going to say to motorists, nothing is going to change, don't worry? Now, obviously, I'm a motorist when I'm driving down to Trowbridge, but when I return to Shurston and walk to the Rattlebone Inn, a very excellent pub, by the way, I'll be a pedestrian and I will want traffic travelling slowly past me because we have very few pavements. In that situation, I want you to be prioritising pedestrians, not motorists. When I cycle to Malmesbury, I'm a cyclist, I want the same. The last time I looked, most people are pedestrians, so I think we should be supporting them as well. So if we are to achieve the type of modal shift to other forms of transport hinted at in this plan, You can't pretend we are supporting motorists by keeping the status quo. But given you're putting this forward, this plan, I presume that you do want change. So are you actually being honest about supporting motorists? Our roads are also getting less safe, as evidenced by the deaths and injuries sustained in Wiltshire over recent years. The numbers killed or seriously injured on Wiltshire roads rose in 2022 to 276, returning to roughly the level of a decade earlier. We know that our rural roads are particularly unsafe. Over the last 5 years, the ratio of reported injuries on Wiltshire's rural roads has varied between 73 and 76% of the total. That's roughly 10% above the British average. So, but rather than have a bold target to reduce casualties as close to zero as possible, like Oxfordshire have done with their Vision Zero strategy, we have a very meek stated outcome, which is merely to improve road safety. I admit that the Vision Zero is mentioned right in the detail of SU 3.5, but is labelled as long-term and is categorised as something we can only influence, not deliver. So as a starting point for improving road safety, I think we need Wiltshire Highways at least have a change of heart and make it easier for communities to get lower speed limits. I find it interesting in the public consultation that the policy with the most support is the one that says we'll provide better access to public and shared transport services. This is slightly at odds, I think, with some of the assertions that the Cabinet are making that the car is king and should remain so in Wiltshire. Given that 56% of the population live in the three principal settlements and the towns, perhaps this needs a rethink.
Can we wind up now,
Yeah,
please, because we are over time?
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. Okay.
Quickly,
say
one sentence.
The most popular responses in terms of how do you wish to travel in the future was bus, walking and rail. So whilst I have many
Thank you.
reservations with this plan, I guess it's better than having nothing at all.
Thank
So I
you,
will actually
Councillor
support it.
Walters. Councillor Adrian Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got two subjects that I really want to bring to the attention of the members here. First of all, I, like everybody else who's speaking here, find there's a lot of words in this, having read most of it over the last 2 days, and not much substance. That's the issue. There's nothing in here to object to, so I will be supporting the motion. But it does say around halfway through, remove the need for some people to travel to access opportunities, thereby increasing the availability for the workforce. It goes on page 422, LTP4 can also help reduce the consumption of fuel by promoting a shift of more sustainable forms of transport, such as active modes like cycling and walking. Appropriate management and maintenance of transport infrastructure can meet a range of other objectives. And then on 424, it goes on to say LPT4 should seek to reduce road congestion, therefore reduce the time to count the transport of goods, help to encourage new inward investment, as well as to help to retain high-skilled labour, which is perfect. It's exactly what we want. But the problem is the other policies the council have are not joined up thinking and don't match the aspirations of this particular proposal. And that's where the weakness is. This is a great proposal with great aspirations, but the council's other objectives conflict with it. With our local plan at the present moment, we have insufficient accommodation for new business development. And I brought to the attention of our local plan constructors exactly that. In Melksham, there are several companies that want to expand and deliver work to our workforce. And they have a third of their staff cycling to work. Yet we're offering them land which is several miles away in another town. So therefore all those staff will have to then get in their cars and go to work, rather than us providing sufficient workspace land in the communities in which they live. And until we address this, where we have two tunnels of vision, then we'll never actually meet the aspirations of this particular programme. The other aspect that I firmly believe in and have concentrated on since being elected is the Equalities Act, which is mentioned on page 428, providing a legislative framework to protect the rights of individuals and the advance of equality and opportunity for all. This then goes on page 434. There can be a risk from injury due to a lack of sustainable footpaths. And then that is progressed further in 435. And then on 365, it says promote greater opportunity for all our citizens. Yet, we build bus stops with increased levels on the footpaths so that disabled people can get on and off the buses, but we don't put in dropped curbs in the older established estates for the disabled to actually get onto the pavement to be able to get onto the bus. So we don't have joined up thinking. And when we put in a substantial bid to try and improve that situation in Chippenham, it was turned down on the basis that the local highways and footpath group could do this on a piecemeal basis to achieve the goal. We are 14 years since the 2010 Equalities Act came in, and yet we only have half the number of drop curbs that we require across the whole of Wiltshire to make this sustainable transport for people. And we're not treating it as a priority. This is where the joined-up thinking doesn't occur. And not only that, we're reducing the amount of money that local highways and footpath groups have from 1.8 million to 0.8 million in our budget. And therefore, the joined-up thinking doesn't come into the policies in here. And that is where we need to change. We need to change it so we have joined-up thinking so that all the different policies are met.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Ian McClellan.
Thank you, Chairman. 1,000+ pages was a lot to absorb or not, depending on how my brain worked at the time. And that's not the way to engage the public, in my view. I accept that the 1,000 pages are needed as evidence if you're going to go for grants and stuff and you have to justify to government and other organisations the evidence that you've got, then fine, yeah, we need all that. But I noticed within the feedback that was there that people were saying, how can we get our heads around all this and know that something's going to happen? So I would take the Councillor Belcher view that is caution, the plan to get something that the public in a few pages can see the projects that are going to go on and are proposed over the years, and they can have a view on those, and then link those pages, because we're all electronic nowadays, link those to the evidence that you've got within that 1,000 pages, so that from a public perception, they can see what's going to happen locally, they can see what the council overall is trying to do, and they can see how they can affect it. And if they like or don't like what's going on locally or think there's extra things that can be done, they can feed into that and make it a practical, moving feast, knowing that the evidence there is in there somewhere within that 1,000+ pages. That's it. Thank you.
Well done, Councillor McLennan. That was 2 minutes. Councillor Nick Dye.
Thank you, Chair. I shall try and beat that. My specific point is regarding how we're going to deliver the digital connectivity vision, especially in cases where the current approach is failing. The contractor informed one particular resident in Cricklade lives metres from the high street, and they were told without justification or any reason that their data was going to be deleted. Another resident actually living on the high street didn't even get the email to say that their information was going to be
Sorry,
deleted.
what's this got to do with LTP4?
LPT4, one of them is digital connectivity.
Oh, I think.
Sorry for reading the document. With so much incomplete work being undertaken and all the shortfalls being deleted from their systems, leaving unknown numbers of people in the lurch, how are we going to remediate the situation?
Thank you. I'm sure Councillor Ray might have something to say about that and whether it's relevant in this particular LTP, the local transport plan. Councillor Chuck Berry.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to be brief because my neighbour said she'd stab me in the leg if I took any length of time. Anyway, notwithstanding that, I love the document, although, to be fair, I've only read Tamara's executive summary. And I put it in the section for aspirational documents along with the local plan. It's something we'd love to see or we'd love to have control over, but simply won't be able to because the market will determine which way local transport goes, and we'll have little or no power over that. And the government will decide whether it taxes diesel fuels and makes it more available from the point of view of alternate fuels and all of the above, so we'll have no control over that either. If you, and forgive me, Chairman, if you look at somewhere like London, and I'm not trying to compare it in a political way, but you go to London, you can't drive over 20 miles an hour, which would be perfect in some of the villages that I live in. And as a result of being a very urban area, if you want to go out and buy something, you can at any time of the day or night, and there it is available for you. That can't be done here in Wiltshire because we're far too rural. I think the problem is we built too many roads at the beginning and therefore allow people to live separately. They should have all been living in one space, and then we would be able to control the transport on an ongoing basis in a much more sustainable way. And I'm sorry, Helen, that your early active travel means that you can't be quite so active now. But I guess that's the way it is, and that's what will happen to me too. It's a great plan, a great strategy, but I think it means little or nothing, just delivers some sort of thought as to what we want to do between now and 38. And if you can tell me in 38 how we'll be living, I think you're a better person than I am, simply because we don't know. Our groceries are delivered. They could be delivered from the sky with drones. We could have AI out on the roads driving around by itself, hopefully not in need of the cat's eyes, which we don't have, because they'll be able to see where they're going magnetically or through GPS. I think it's really interesting. It probably means nothing, simply because the public are going to insist to do what they do, or the government in turn is going to insist that we should do what they tell us to do. So great job, everybody. Great effort, but I'll put it in the cupboard for now.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Nick Holder.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise, Tamara, if I'm stealing an element of your thunder in your response. I wanted to address 3 comments that have been made, particularly in relation to highways and information that is apparently not in LTP4 that should do, or some comments that have been made about the input from the highways team into LTP4. Firstly, I'd like to address the comment made by our friend Andrew Nicholson around cross-border working between ourselves and Baines and Somerset. And I'm going to talk particularly in terms of cross-border working in relation to highways. And I'll make one very clear point. It's not very easy for us to engage fundamentally with colleagues in Baines when they consistently tell residents who are crossing the border from Wiltshire into Baines that Cleveland Bridge is closed. Those signs still persist, the work has been done, and they're forcing HGVs to come off that route through Wiltshire. And until and unless they address that issue that we've asked them many times to deal with, we're not really interested in having a conversation with them about cross-border activity, because they are forcing through their actions HGVs to come through Wiltshire and compound the issues we have of pollution, particularly around Westbury, West Ashton and Yarnbrook. So I'm sorry, until they're prepared to do that, we really don't want to have a conversation with them specifically about cross-border working with regards to highways. With regards to the comments from Councillor Sample, who I see has left the chamber, and I apologise to Tamara if it steals your thunder, we do have a plan for electric vehicle infrastructure, and I was presented this by the highways team on Friday of last week with Councillor Puntis and Councillor Rogers, the 2 portfolio holders. We are looking at relatively quickly, as soon as LTP4 is approved, to be looking at installing charging points in streets that are full of terraced houses. And that's something that is contained within the electric vehicle infrastructure plan. We've got staff in post since December. We've got applications submitted to central government. And as of Friday of last week from my briefing, we are hopeful that we will be able to roll out electric vehicle infrastructure in our terrace streets and deal with that very issue, because it is an issue that is clearly exists in many of our towns where we have terrace streets. And the final thing I want to say is, Councillor Foster, I understand your frustration in terms of, you've said you've taken on many occasions an LHV substantive bid to do something, in particular with regards to trough curbs in Chippenham. All I can say is that the LHV substantive bid pot is very limited, as always it has been. The total budget each year is about 275,000. We're not really clear what the substantive bid funding will be for the next financial year because we haven't had that element of the settlement confirmed yet by central government. They are dragging their heels. They're telling us it's going to be July, it might be later. But I will say this. The opposition constantly vote against additional investment in our highways, and maybe if they took a different approach, there might be funds available to address some of those issues that you constantly go on about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holder. Councillor Edward Kirk.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to reiterate that point that we've only had the 500 submissions to this plan. I don't think that is a good indication that the public are actually listening or paying attention to this plan. However the format was done, it should have been done differently, so it actually gets more of the input from local people. In terms of how I see this council operate, I don't think we listened to what the actual people in the areas want. And I come back to Mr. Bucknell's, Councillor Bucknell's point regarding about Wootton Bassett, his area. And I've seen that in my own division. You have a plan, we go off and get the funding, but it's quite often not what the residents want. We end up with cycle lanes that don't go anywhere, cycle lanes that are dangerous and put cyclists back onto the road. And in effect, they end up not being used. All it's achieved is using government funding and just wasting it. So I do think there needs to be a common sense approach to actually what we're trying to do, and it needs to be led by the community, not imposed by cabinet members signing up for money, putting in these schemes, and local residents having no control over it. All our residents want better walkways. I agree completely on drop curbs. It's not enough for them. That's a priority. I think everyone will agree with that. But some of our cycling infrastructure is just appalling. You should look at whether it's going to achieve its objective before implementing it. And if cyclists aren't going to use it, and all it's going to do is clog up the roads and restrict the pavement, why on earth put it in? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kirk. Councillor Philip Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, just picking up Councillor McClelland, we did an executive summary which refers to the main document, which is 22 pages long. So I think what you suggested should happen actually did. And then, because I couldn't resist it, and my apologies, Councillor Belcher, but according to Wikipedia, Corsham is about 23.8 times smaller than Wiltshire. And if you did 42 pages and times it by 23.8, you get 1,000 pages. So just wanted to correct the Lib Dems numbers once again and couldn't resist it. My apologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Dalton.
Chairman, thank you. I will support the document before us today, and just been listening with interest on what members have had to say around the chamber this morning. Although Salisbury gets mentioned 137 times, I think, as was said earlier on, Harnham gets a mention once. Sadly, that was for 5 HGV accidents, so I understand, according to this document. So I don't know if I can ask officers, please, to let me know what those accidents were on the A3094, because if I can campaign more for safety issues, then I will do so and use that as evidence to campaign for that. Measure, I think is it I 2.6 or is it 12.6? I think it's I 2.6 on targeted road infrastructure or junction improvements to relieve congestion. So further down that document on page 40, it mentions possible locations as the Salisbury junctions. Could I also ask what the Salisbury junctions were talking about? I assume it's the Harlem Gyratory, which I've been badgering on about for the past 5 years or so on improvements due to the housing. But could I please ask again, and I asked here just a few weeks ago at the full council on the Harlem Gyratory improvements, which I understand there is 1.7 million in the council's budget, which was passed a few weeks ago. But again, I've not heard anything. So if I can please plead for some information on that, please, so I can pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dalton. I have no other speakers, so at this point I'll ask Councillor Ray, as a mover of the original motion, if she has any final comments to make before we move to the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. I will just sum up on a few of the themes that have been raised today. So firstly, on the extent of the document, yes, it is a weighty tome. I think we've all reflected on that. And also it is a requirement of government in order that we get our funding. And that's the most important thing that we can do, is get the funding to make this stuff happen. As my colleague pointed out, the executive summary at 20 pages is, I think, an easy read, even for all of us who are incredibly busy. But what is really key is the delivery plan. That's the stuff we're going to do. And, you know, thank you for your input, and thank you for your input on an ongoing basis. In terms of the number of contributions to the consultation, I understand that other Shire counties, Warwickshire had 300, Worcestershire 388, and looking across the piece, we're very much in the same space. Thank you to officers, communications officers, and to the portfolio holder for communications, who worked really, really hard to get this consultation out and to encourage people to respond. There was some discussion on places in terms of how many times places were mentioned. Well, I actually think, and I haven't run the numbers, but it was broadly, you know, in line with the sort of the size of the place. But you'll know that the whole thing is structured around a place-based arrangement with our towns, our market towns, and our rural areas. And the document and the policies are reflective of that. And, you know, just looking at the point that Councillor Steve Bucknell made on Royal Wootton Bassett, well, I'm pleased that you already have your bypass in Royal Wootton Bassett. It's called the M4. In terms of the cycleway, we are dependent on land availability and funding, but that forms part of the LC WIPs. And looking across, many people mentioned and made pitches for improved cycling and walking and wheeling infrastructure across the county. And those, I'm really pleased at the progress that's been made on LC WIPs. And there is much more on active travel in the delivery plan. A number of people also spoke about rail. Well, you know, that obviously is, we're working as part of a big system and with industry. Last week, I met with Network Rail. I also attended a DFT meeting, and later today, Richard is also off to Whitehall to meet with the Department for Transport. You are right, the RYR programme came to an end, but actually in Wiltshire we got way beyond that, in that Network Rail then went away as part of following the Devices study and have done a rail strategy. I hope you've read that, the rail strategy for Wiltshire, and that's what we will be working with Network Rail on over the coming months and as we go forward. You know, the key priorities are to create capacity at Westbury so that we can get more trains up the line and up to Bath and Bristol and down to Salisbury. The opportunity to put a passing loop in on the Melksham track so that we can get more trains down on that vital Trans-Wilts line, which is great for connectivity from Swindon down to Salisbury, but also is used as a diversionary route. And as far as the stations go, as you may know, the Devizes Gateway is dependent on that capacity being created at Westbury, and for Corsham, for a service and capacity on the line from Bath and Chippenham. So, you know, it's good news that GWR has been running the Saturday service, the Bristol-Oxford service, and we understand that they are looking to continue that and to create the capacity. But those are the focus for Salisbury. On to electric vehicle charging. Well, we do have funding for as Nick Holder spoke, for electric vehicle charging, for supplementing the private market, and in particular for on-street parking for those residents who do not have off-street parking. And good progress is being made by officers. That was shared with the area board engagement leads last week, and I look forward to bringing that back in the next council to take that forward. On buses, the plans are there. We have secured the BSIP funding, the Bus Service Improvement Plan funding, and that is supplementing our services, and the team are now working on how we can improve infrastructure, including, I think it was Adrian who mentioned access from bus stops and onto buses. So I'm confident that with our LHFIG and our BSIP funding working together, that we will make some progress there. We also spoke about the major routes. And again, very much working with the industry, working with partners, working with government. I'm pleased that at last the M4 to Dorset study was published last week, and National Highways have set out a strategic framework for how we take that forward. We will be working really hard to secure that funding, to get further improvements to the A350 corridor and those vital routes down the west of the county, and around Salisbury, as well as the A303 and the challenges that presents to Amesbury in particular, and all of the rat running that happens in those villages on the plain. So in summary, I think I've covered most of the issues that have been raised. If I haven't, you're very welcome to write to me and I will respond in writing. But thank you. I'd then like to move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. So I have determined that there will be a recorded vote on this item, and you have 20 seconds to vote. Good. So that has all been approved. Thank you very much. We have got no further business, but I just want to remind you that the next ordinary meeting will be the annual meeting to be held on the 20th of May after the local elections. So goodbye and good luck.